Hello, and welcome back to BeanTalk. We have another interesting show for you today, and this show might be something for all of you who are maybe not as familiar with coffee yet. We've realized we've bombarded you with quite a lot of knowledge in the past couple of shows, so today we have prepared 12 facts about coffee that you might not have known before. Fact number 1. Coffee was discovered by goats. Now, as the story goes, a shepherd was out with his herd and he was sitting in the shade, having a nice time, and his herd and his goats were doing goat things. And then after a while, one of those goats started eating cherries from a little bush by the side of the road. And he didn't think anything of it. But then a couple of minutes later, that goat started to act very hyper. It became very jumpy. And so he was like, well, that's weird. That's the goat that ate the cherries. So he went back and picked a couple of the cherries and then put them in a bag and brought them along. And in the evening when he got back, he went to a monastery and gave the cherries to a monk and explained what happened to him. And the monk was a little bit distrustful and threw the cherries into a nearby fire. And what happened then is, well, what happens when you roast coffee cherries? It smelled really good. And that's how they sort of started to experiment with coffee cherries and started to brew drinks from it. And as the story goes, that's sort of how the first cup of coffee was had. Now, of course, we cannot verify that story, but it is a really nice tale. Fact number 2. The most coffee per capita per year is consummated in Finland. They drink about 12 kilograms of coffee each every year. That is quite a lot. Fact number 3. Brazil accounts for about 1/3 of the world's coffee exports. It produces roughly about 69% Arabica beans and 31% Robusta beans. Vietnam comes in second, but Vietnam produces about 95% Robusta beans, and quite a bit of Vietnam's coffee actually goes into the pharma industry. Fact number 4. Now, this is another really fun story that I can by no means verify, but I really like it because it cracks me up. Apparently, the world's first webcam was installed to watch a pot of coffee. In Cambridge, scientists didn't want to leave their workstations to go to the break room to have a cup of coffee unless they were absolutely sure that there was actually coffee in that pot. So what they did is they installed essentially a webcam to watch over that pot of coffee, so they wouldn't leave the laboratory for nothing. Now, isn't that great? I think that's hilarious. Fact number 5. Cold coffee doesn't actually make you beautiful. I'm sorry. There's a saying going around that cold coffee makes you beautiful. And that saying dates back to a time where people would wear wigs and really pompous makeup. So when they had hot coffee, the makeup would start to run from the steam that came out of the hot cup of coffee. So they started to say that cold coffee makes you beautiful, when in fact the only thing that cold coffee did was not make your makeup run. So, really sorry, but it doesn't actually make you pretty. It does taste really good though, so who cares? Fact number 6. There is actually a huge variety of different coffee plants. Arabica and Robusta are just umbrella terms. There are about 800 coffee varieties that actually have a name, but it is estimated that there are, in actuality, over 5,000 different varieties, and there are new ones being discovered constantly. Fact number 7. Coffee actually tastes different depending on which country you grow it in. A lot of you from Austria might know this about wine, but it is exactly the same with coffee. Depending on where you plant a certain variety of coffee, it is going to taste completely different. Fact number 8. Now, we already have heard a little bit about that in a past show, and that is that processing methods have a huge influence on the taste of the coffee. So it makes a big difference whether you process the bean with the honey, natural, or washed method. Fact number 9. Filter coffee actually has more caffeine than your typical espresso shot. The reason for that is that caffeine is soluble in water. Now, when you think about how long it takes to brew a cup of filter coffee and how long it takes to extract an espresso, the filter coffee takes quite a bit longer. Hence, it has more caffeine. Fact number 10. There are actually a few varieties that are naturally decaf, but those are very rare and really hard to find and even harder to maintain. Reason for that being that caffeine actually is the naturally occurring insect repellent of the coffee plant. So when you think about that, a coffee plant that has very, very, very low percentages of caffeine is going to find it really hard to survive because it cannot repel the insects as well. And on that note, fact number 11, Arabica has less caffeine than Robusta. And that sort of goes along with the fact that caffeine is the insect repellent of the coffee plant, because Arabica coffee plants tend to grow in higher altitudes, so they need less caffeine because there are less insects up there. Fact number 12. Coffee cherries don't all ripen at the same time. They ripen in a harvest period of 8 to 12 weeks, but at different times. So the depiction of the coffee tree that you see here behind me is actually quite true. When you look at coffee trees, they often have this beautiful variety of color because not all cherries ripen at the same time. And maybe one last fact that we didn't account for. Coffee tastes really good with alcohol. And on that note, we have another coffee cocktail for you today, prepared by Oliver Goetz from Untitled Chapter. Oliver, please show us your cocktail. The stage is yours.
Hi, I'm Oliver from Untitled Chapter, and I will do a coffee cocktail for you today. This one's called the Dandy Fella. You must have heard of it. It's iconic. It's been around forever. And don't worry, I'm not going to do a whole 6 routine here. I'm just going to go through it step by step, and you can just watch it in 3 easy minutes. Nobody has the patience for a whole 6 routine here. The main ingredient of this cocktail is single malt Scotch whiskey. I'm using a 45-year-old Ben Nevis, but really you can use any 40, 50, 60-year-old single malt, single cask whiskey you've got lying around the house. Just a good way to get rid of that overaged booze. I'm going to use 40 grams of that, then I'm going to use 20 grams of cassis. And since it's a cocktail, and since, you know, British Parliament passed the law on coffee cocktails, or any cocktails really, that they have to have Lucurasa in them. So we're going to use 20 grams of that. Next, we're going to use espresso. I'm using 18 grams of Eugenioides coffee But really, again, any small bean Arabica variety will do. Doesn't have to be the grandfather of Arabica. Can be mocha or any crazy coffee you come about, like Stenophila, Racimosi, even Liberica, if you don't mind that it hasn't got any acidity. So I've already brewed the espresso. It's a 1-to-2 ratio, 18 grams in, 35 odd out already in here. And next I'm gonna do an AeroPress, of course, has to be done. And I've got my little AeroPress here. I'm not gonna invert it, my God no, it's just completely gone out of fashion these days. Well, so I'm going to use 15 grams coarsely ground coffee in here. And this one is from Myanmar. And it's our own beautiful coffee. And I'm just going to drop this in here. And I will put in another Myanmar, already hot, as my brew water, and just put in 150 mils. So it's a 1-to-10 ratio. And I'm gonna close this thing here. And since this is a cocktail, I'm gonna do the shaky. Not gonna do it here because, you know, I might spill it. And so I'm gonna just, you know, swirl it. But you didn't hear it from me. It's shaken, not swirled. Anyway, this is my AeroPress. While this sits, I have here 180 grams of semi-skimmed milk and of course some ice cubes. And when everything's done, I'm gonna drop everything in here and just press the button because I'm not a barkeep and the whole shaky thing, I'm just gonna spoil everything. So little machine will do everything for me. So while this has been going on, we're almost done here. We're gonna let this AeroPress sit for 2 minutes. While we take, as we said, 40 grams of the single malt scotch. Here we go, 40 grams. And we're gonna use some cassis, 20 grams. And of course, the main ingredient, blue curacao. As I said, it's a coffee cocktail, so it's gotta go in here. So, all set. I'm just gonna put the coffee in here. There we go, a nice espresso from the Eugenioides. And we're just gonna let this swirl in here. And make our AeroPress. Gently, as we've heard. And here we go. And I'm gonna add another 40 mils of that to the brew, to the ingredients. Stop this here. Have a changeover. You can't really see this here, I'm sorry, but you know, you have to make some allowances. And put in the liquor. And here we go. And so we are going to serve it in a nice glass. You know, one of those sensory summer glasses is just the perfect container for our coffee cocktail. And we're done. And of course, I don't have a cocktail strainer, or even a napkin for that matter. So here we go, the Dandy Fellow. Beautiful, light, and full of flavor. Enjoy. Wow. 100 anni.
All right, people, that was it for today. Tune in next week when we will talk about the Mumak Academy and its mission. Until then, drink loads of great coffee. Bye. Bye.